Okay, my friends, today we are going to be learning about shapes. And we're going to be learning about shapes in two different ways. So, we're going to be learning about shape in how we can use it in math, and we're going to learn about shape and how we can use it with art. Um, but first, I'm going to ask you guys some questions first. So, um, can anyone tell me what shape this is? And then I would have students respond and say a triangle. And then, okay, what about this shape? And then I'd have students tell me that it's a rectangle. I probably would either call on hands, or if everybody's raising their hand at this point, probably pull sticks. Um, Ask them what shape this is. And this shape as well. And lastly, I'd ask them about this shape, making sure they know that it's a trapezoid. This way I can get their pre-assessment of knowing what the different shapes are. I probably would have them turn and talk with one or two of the different shapes instead of calling on somebody every single time. Like for the trapezoid, I probably would have them turn and talk with somebody to tell them what the shape is. And then after we're able to answer those, we are going to talk about composing shapes. So we were able to look at what these different shapes are. And when we are going to be learning about math today, in math, we're learning how to compose shapes. And compose is a big word. So I'm going to tell you what compose means. Composing shapes means putting smaller shapes together to make one larger shape. So, for example, we could take two triangles like this picture and we could make it into square. We could get two different smaller smaller triangles to create a diamond. But for our math, we're learning how we're going to be taking these shapes, these smaller shapes, and we're going to be making it into one big shape. When we are talking about art, can anyone tell me what the difference is between 3D shapes and 2D shapes? And my students' responses would probably be how 3D shapes are more like you can see all the sides, and how 2D shapes are just flat. And that like in these pictures you can see the difference, that one of them you can see all the different sides and it looks like it's coming out, whereas in the 2D shape you can only see the flat side of it. So yeah. Okay, so we're going to be learning about a new art element and it's called shape. Isn't that so cool that we can connect shape with, or we can connect art with math? And in both of these subjects we learn about shape. So something about this art element is there are two kinds of shapes. There's geometric shapes and there's organic shapes. Geometric shapes are ones that are 2D, and they're like the ones that you usually see, like a square, a circle, rectangle, triangle, trapezoids. These are the 2D shapes. The organic shapes are more like if you were to see a leaf that's not like a set shape, but it still is creating a shape. So we're going to watch this video that will help us explain a little bit more about what shape is when we're learning about it in art.
Next, let's talk about shape. A shape is created when a line closes in on itself, forming a flat enclosed area, and they are two-dimensional. Shapes are all around us. They can be geometric, like squares, triangles, and circles, which are precise and often man-made. Or they can be organic, like the regular shapes of clouds, leaves, and petals, which feel more natural and free-flowing. Shapes help define objects and figures in a piece, creating a structure and form within an artwork. They can be used to build complex images or convey simple ideas, making them essential in both realistic and abstract art. Artists use shapes to build everything in their artwork.
Okay, awesome. So, we don't want the video anymore. Okay, so just like the video said, there was the geometric, and there's the organic. Today, we're going to be focusing on the geometric shapes. Um, so we're going to be taking in math of composing shapes, and we're going to be taking in art of learning about geometric shapes. Something that is really important with the shape element of art is that they're two-dimensional. They're 2D. They're not 3D shapes, they're just 2D shapes. We're going to look at an artist that uses 2D shapes, geometric shapes, in his art. So his name is Romero Britto. I want you guys to read it along with me. So this is where I'd have the students read along the information about Romero with me. So it says, we are going to learn about an artist named Romero Britto. He is known for making bright, colorful artwork using simple shapes like circles, squares, triangles, and hearts. He puts these shapes together to create fun and interesting pictures. If you look closely at his art, you can see how he combines shapes to build bigger shapes. This connects to what we are learning in math because we are also practicing how to put shapes together to create new pictures, just like an artist. I probably would break the paragraph into different sections because it is a bigger paragraph and it's with first graders. So I'd probably would read like the first 3 sentences and say, oh, so we are able to look at triangles, circles, and squares, and he puts them together to create a fun and interesting picture. And then I'd read the second part and just talk about how that's applying to what we're going to be doing is taking shapes and putting them into a bigger picture. So then I want you guys to look at these pictures. There are 7 pictures on this slide. And I want you to turn and talk with your partner and pick out different shapes that you can see from his artwork. And I want you and your partner to at least look at all of the pictures, but pick one picture and see if you can point out 5 different shapes that you see in one of his pictures. So this is where I would give not a lot of time, but a good amount of time to let students look at the pictures and to be able to pick shapes from it. I would have my students paired up to where they'd be able to not get distracted, and I'd have it paired up to be able to help my students that need help with like the language barrier. Like they can be sitting next to someone that can help them with the language. Okay, so after that, I would get their attention back and I would say, okay, I want a few of my friends to share out what different shapes they found. And I would let them do like any of the pictures out of the 7, and I'd give them I'd give them a decent amount of time to share because there are so many shapes in these pictures that like a few of them could be pointed out. But I would for sure want to make sure that the 5 big shapes that we're learning about are mentioned. So like the circle, the rectangles, the squares, the trapezoids, the ovals, like, and I'm sure a lot of them would say a heart, and that's considered like a shape. And then I would talk to them about how when we look at the pictures, we can see that there's small little circles, but we can see that it creates one big picture of like these flowers. Or he uses these ovals in the teddy bear and these circles, but all together it comes with one picture. Or even this alligator, how it has multiple triangles, but it was able to create a triangle. And I would say to the students, notice how there's no like blank spots on his artwork. How like every spot is filled with different shapes. There's not just like one blank spot. And so I would say like this is so cool how we can connect art and math together because he's taking, for example, 2 semicircles and he's creating one big circle. And that goes with our math element of composing the shapes, because he's taking 2 triangles to create one big bow. So he's taking 2 shapes to compose to create one big shape. And this connects to the element of art because he's using 2-dimensional shapes and he's using geometric shapes that are those 2D flat shapes in his art. So now we're going to be doing our own artwork. You're going to be creating your own art. So you will be creating your own project of anything you want. It can be an object, it can be an animal, it can be anything. I really want you guys to be able to express who you are through your artwork. I really want you to be able to express something that's important to you. You are required to have at least 5 shapes added to your project. So we've talked a lot about triangles, circles, rectangles, ovals, and trapezoids. I want you to have at least those big 5 in it. And you can add a lot more to yours if you want, but I need you to make sure you have those at least 5. Then you will be sharing with your classmates your final project. So whether that is you turning and talking with a partner and showing your partner, or we're gonna have time to have an open time for students to come and share with what they want. You are also going to be writing, I forgot to put this in the slide, so I'll write this on the whiteboard, but you're going to be writing sentences about your picture, explaining like your artwork. And I would have sentence starters for those students that need it, and I would have a vocabulary side, which we'll see later, and I'd have I'd sneeze. I would have visuals for them. So during this, I'd also say to students, remember, you're going to be collaborating is a big word. You're going to be working with other people to learn how to share materials, because we're all going to be using glues, we're all going to be using crayons, we're all going to be using scissors. And so I need you guys to remember that we are working together to safely use our materials. Something that's really important is how we use our materials. We only use scissors to cut paper. We only use glue to glue onto paper. We only use like crayons and markers and colored pencils to only draw on paper. We are not using materials to do other things with it. So we need to make sure we're safely using our materials. And we also need to remember that we're working together with our friends. So you're going to be sharing your materials, which is something that you guys need to learn how to do, is share with other people. And we're going to be hearing our friends' ideas. And so when our friends are sharing, we need to be respectful in the way that we're listening to our friends and the way that we're presenting our artwork. Like, we need to be respectful in both ways. So you are going to work on your art project. Okay, so I'm going to give you a template, and it's going to look like this. Let's see. It didn't print out. But basically what the template is it's going to be all the different shapes that are on a piece of paper. You're going to cut out these shapes, and you're going to put them together on a picture. And then you can draw around those shapes and make sure your picture looks like one big picture came together. So let me show you an example. Okay, this is Mrs. Matson's work. I cut out a rectangle, squares, and a circle and triangles. So here's my big object. I put 5 shapes together. I got 5 2D geometric shapes, and I put them all together to create a dog. And then I made sure all my space was filled with geometric shapes. So I have a heart, I have a star, I have more squares, I have a triangle, I have semicircles, I have rectangles, I have a triangle as his tail. So I will put this on the board. So that's an example of my artwork. And then here is an example of what your writing is going to look like. I will put this under the dot camera, but just to kind of let you know like how your sentences should sound. So I said, I used a circle for a head and eyes. And I used a rectangle for the dog's body. And I used triangles for his ears. And I used squares for his legs. And then I put ovals for spots on the dog. And then my final sentence was, my animal has 5 shapes composed to create a dog. So that way your sentences, I have the words underlined, and I have how many shapes I had in my big picture, and I made sure to add the word composed to it because that's a big word that we were learning about today. So you're gonna have time to work on yours. Here is a vocabulary slide. So when you're doing your writing, you can see that there's the 5 that you need at least on this side. And when you do those other 5, then you can add a trapezoid, a semicircle, or a diamond into your artwork. But I want you to for sure pick 5 of the one that's on the purple side. So this is where I would give students time to work on their art. And this is when I would walk around and ask students things like, what shapes are you using? What different shapes are you going to add? Is this a 2D or a 3D shape, to make sure they're understanding that they need to be adding 2D shapes. And then I would be keeping track on, I have like an observational checklist to, I would put the student's name on the number, and then I would write next to it like the answers that they were saying and what what they're putting into their artwork, so that way I can be able to see what exactly they were doing. And I'd have like enough for all my students. So that's what I would be doing during the time that they'd be working. And then I feel like I would remind them again, like when I could notice that they were getting close to being done with their artwork, remind them of the sentences that they were writing, because I feel like giving them the instruction of doing the art and the writing in one big chunk is a lot for first graders. So I would explain the art element and give them time to work, and then I would remind them that they have to write their sentences. And if they need to verbally explain to their partner first what they're going to write for their sentences, I would allow that, and I would let them talk with a partner about the different shapes that they used and where they used the shape. And I would also remind them that they're like, while they're working on their art, just be like, remember, you're using your creativity and you're using your imagination, like you're using what you are coming up with, and it can be any object you want or any animal you want while you're working on your art project. And this is you being able to express who you are through your artwork, and adding in different colors that you like, and adding in different objects that you like, and that these are like things that you can, that they see every day, and it's tied into their personal life. So I'd give enough time to work on the art element itself, so making sure they add in the geometric 2D shapes, and then I would make sure they're adding in the math element of composing shapes to create one big picture. And then when they're after that, I would have them write their sentences explaining what different 5 shapes they used for each part of their object, and then an overall saying, I used 5 shapes composed to create whatever they created. So after they finish their art piece and their writing piece, I would do a formal assessment. So after the time's up, I'd say, okay, my friends, so now we're gonna have the open time for you guys to share your artwork and your sentences with us. Um, so I would have students go up, and as students went up with the same observational checklist, I would ask them questions like, how did you combine shapes to create your pictures? So as they're talking about their artwork, I'd ask them these questions so that they're understanding that they put two what's the word shapes together to create one big shape. I'd ask them, what 2D shapes did you use in your artwork? And then for like an SEL outcome, I'd ask them, how did you help a classmate today? And what did you create using shapes today? So that way I could generally see if they were able to put the shapes together and use those 2D shapes. So I would let students present if they wanted to, but the ones that needed that definition and didn't want to present from the class, I would have them turn and talk with a partner and explain their artwork, but make it so I could be standing next to them when they are presenting it with their partner, to be able to hear their answers and to still be able to ask the question. And then after whoever presented that wanted to present and they talked to their partners, I would just close it like with saying, your guys' artwork looked so amazing today. Everyone's was so different. You guys were able to do math by putting 2 shapes together to create one big picture or a shape, and you were able to use the art element by putting geometric shapes in there and putting 2D geometric shapes, and we were able to combine those two together to create one big art piece, and all of your artwork turned out super amazing, and we're going to display your artwork and then turn your writing piece into me. And that would be my lesson plan.